and turns he takes throughout the design process is a challenge, but a journey well worth taking. John has been described as having a cornucopia of the mind. His knowledge of art, architecture, history, and literature is enviable. He brings great pleasure to the work, and his enthusiasm is contagious. John's name was always the trump card when trying to entice technicians and craftspeople into the shop for a particular project. All one needed to do was mention John Conklin as the designer. This virtually assured that calendars would be cleared and that folks would catch the next train into town to be part of that production, just to experience a build under the direction of John Conklin. Perhaps Rhoda Levine, an opera director, said it best when she said, "John is so provocative in getting one to think. He makes me better than I am." I know that all of those who have had the privilege of working with John would agree. It is with great pleasure that I introduce John Conklin.
This puts me at a somewhat odd theatrical position, the staging of this particular event, or the architectural setting, whichever you choose to think of it as. And when Martha suggested that, asked me if I'd be interested in coming and speaking here, I said yes, but what on earth would anybody in architecture want to listen to a stage designer talk? And she didn't really have an answer for that, but she said, come along anyway, so here I am. It has, however, been a very interesting experience, both in planning for this, thinking about what would be appropriate or interesting to say, and then particularly in the rather short, unfortunately short time that I've been here, and at the school, and being able to meet some of the students and faculty and to observe some of the classes, to consider what a stage, for me to reconsider what a stage designer is and does, and how that relates to an architect, or my perception of what an architect is and does, and what kind of questions that raises about a range of questions, but particularly about something that is a familiar problem to everyone, but which maybe is interesting to look at in a slightly different perspective, and that is the problem of text. With a sort of subsidiary thought and discussion about models. One of the reasons that I was rather concerned about speaking to a group of architects was that for a long time, and I was talking to some people today about this, and they assured me that perhaps this was not such a problem anymore, that the worst thing you could say about a building seemed to me that it was a stage set. And that because it brought along a whole sort of series of negative connotations that the theater has, which has always sort of surprised and rather bewildered me in a way, that because it seems to me that in some sense the theater, and indeed design in the theater, could be perceived as the sort of central metaphorical way of describing our lives. I mean, it's clear that we all dress in costumes, we live in sets, we drive props, we act out scenes, we play roles, we attempt to write the play of our life, sometimes more successfully than other times, but it's still theater, not just to critics, and has a suggestion of falseness. It has a suggestion of fakery. It has a suggestion of a kind of on the good side, it has the side of magic and fantasy, and on the bad side, it has a kind of quality of charlatanism, which again, I think is an interesting way to think about the way we think about our lives, and why that should be true, and what that means. And I'd just like to speak a little bit about some further ideas about this metaphor of the theater, that and why perhaps it does have sort of negative connotations along with the good ones. I think we have a sense that we sit in a theater. The theater is now very egocentric. It is a person, you sitting in an audience, looking at a stage. The movement of the theater from the outdoors to the indoors seems to me, again, an interesting and rather significant way of looking at this problem. And much of what I'm going to say is very full of very questionable generalities, but I'm going to proceed and just hope that what I'm raising are more questions than answers. But if you think of the Greek theater, if you think indeed of most medieval theater and of the Elizabethan theater, it took place outdoors. It took place in spaces that were circles or parts of circles. It was lit by the sun. It was filled with the dangers and the unpredictability of weather, of the sky, of the movement of the clouds over it. And it was, at its best, a religious, community, spiritual experience that was where the audience, the actors, the priests were united together in some sort of community experience. And the theaters, as I said, it seemed to me, represented consciously, particularly in the Elizabethan theater, where it was the wooden O, the O of the world, the hierarchy of class, the painted sky on the top of the theater, which then the eye moved across to the real sky above. And then there was the moment in which the theater, after this period, beginning of the 1600s approximately, moved indoors. And suddenly, it seems to me the whole way of thinking about the theater and the way that the theater operates as a metaphor changed. It became under artificial lights. It became, to a large extent, first a court entertainment, an elitist court entertainment. It architecturally began to unite in a way that hadn't really happened so precisely, to unite scenery, the proscenium arch, and the theater were all reflections of one another in the same way that the audience was a reflection of the actors, that the king or the duke or whoever who was often participated in the play in the entertainment. It was about him. It was played to courtiers, this endless sort of series of reflections. And the proscenium, as I said, the proscenium arch came in, became the picture frame. And then, but still it's interesting to think that the lights were up, as it were. The auditorium was lit by candles, as was the stage. And until the 19th century, until the ability to dim house lights, the audience was, in some sense, united with the actors. And as the technology came, as the quality of light changed and the technology changed and the house lights were dimmed, for the first time, the audience was separated from the actors. The actors became the lit figure and gained power that way, but the audience also gained power by becoming private, solo individuals in the darkness, looking at this picture and being able to dream, to withdraw into a dream state. And I think it's interesting that this historically happened sort of at the time, the rise of the decline of aristocracy and the rise of bourgeois culture, when in the latter part of the 19th century, great opera houses like the Paris Opera became the new cathedrals, the new chartres of consumption and of opulence and of dreams in the darkness. And that sort of change of followed by Freud and a kind of a way of analyzing all of this has become again the working metaphor. There have been various strategies to overcome this. Say, because I was in a class today where the discussion and the work was on cinemas, on movie theaters. Perhaps the ultimate theater now, and probably the most popular theater in a certain sense, is movie theaters, where absolute darkness is required, where the contrast between light and dark is I mean, you can still do theater with the house lights up, but you can't do movies that way. So that the theater, if movies are theater, which is again the question, in what way are they theater? The most compelling, the most disturbing, and in some ways the most powerful thing is the thing that has to take place in absolute darkness. And it's interesting to think, saying about the strategies in which everyone tries to break out of this thing that has become a kind of straitjacket of the theater in some ways. First of all, how disturbing it is now, often even though it's done all the time and you're sort of used to it, when the house lights come up or the actors come out towards you. When they break through that compact where they are powerful but only here, and you have complete power there. And when that proscenium line is broken, when that golden arch is broken through, it can become very disturbing. And just mentioned, because I was thinking about the idea of theater techniques, and that when you sit in a theater, you see everything in miniature. And it is disturbing. It's like sitting in the front row of a theater. When you're right, it seems too close because the actors are too big. They intrude too much on you. The theater is there in a way, and it's miniaturized. it's therefore controllable. It is full of forced perspective. It is distanced. The violation of privacy and control is a powerful force. But as I said, there are forces that are trying to break through that, audience forces too. Shakespeare in the Park, where you go outdoors. You have the vagaries of weather. You have the vagaries of the joy of moonlight and the sorrow of rain. There's something that's controlling it other than just human will. There are numerous events which you sure know. Peter Brook's Mahabharata, which was done outdoors in a quarry in Avignon lit by fire. There are site-specific productions. There's one interesting just case where these two things collided. I did a production of Twelfth Night in Baltimore at Center Stage, and there the stage backs up against the wall that is on a street, and there is a door in the back that opens onto the sidewalk and onto the street. And we used that as, there was no masking, we used that as the entrance for Viola and Sebastian, who come into the world of Twelfth Night, into the world which could be a theater world. They come in from the outside, playing roles and assuming disguises, assuming roles. And they come in from the sea. They are supposedly washed up from the sea. So we had fake rain that was outside the door. And at night, and we lit it, so the door opened, you saw this rain, and you were dimly aware of cars going by and stuff, but they came through. But at the matinees, they would open the door and come in, and people would walk along, and the door was stayed open for quite a while. People would walk along the sidewalk and look in, and suddenly, what was going on? And they would see this whole audience looking at them, and cars were going by on the outside. And it was a miraculous moment because, again, it was an intrusion that was completely non-planned. You never knew what was going to happen, or no one ever actually came in. We were hoping at some point that somebody would actually just walk in, and what would happen? So there are those interesting moments where a kind of real event or an uncontrollable event. The theater is, although in some ways it's completely uncontrolled, it thrives on a sort of, in a certain way, on a sense of repetition, on a sense of rehearsal, on a sense of plan, of scenario, of scheme, of event that is planned out and rehearsed and happens over and over again in a way that's interestingly different from movies, which truly freeze it, never to be changed. There have also been experiments which, in a way, go back to this kind of where the audience is put in control of the narrative, as well as the literally put in control of the narrative. When Bob Wilson did Einstein on the beach at the Metropolitan, the house lights stayed up for part of the time, and he encouraged the audience to simply come and go as they pleased, so that they were not. They were encouraged to break the fixity of their numbered seat in which they would sit and watch this. And I remember, and many people feel that this was his best work, when Bob was starting out, or a little bit further along than that. He used to do these wonderful pieces downtown that were like 17 hours long. And you went, and you sort of drifted in and out, and you would like leave and go to dinner, and come back 2 hours later, and you'd open the door, and there would be like 50 ostriches crossing the stage while Tristan and Isolde was playing, and you would go, and you would just, you never knew what was going to happen. You never knew what anything meant. There was no, you controlled the experience. And there was a wonderful freedom, obviously, in that. And there was also another very interesting and very influential production in New York, which, interestingly enough, got critically roasted, but was a great success, and was an idea that has not been picked up too much, and that was Orlando Furioso, which was done it was an adaptation of the poem. It was done in Italian, and it was done in a huge tent in Bryant Park, like a tennis, one of those hot air tennis tents. Anyway, you went into the space. For the cowards, there were seats on the side, bleachers. But what was happening was that at one end of this huge space was a proscenium theater, proscenium arch, with a scene going on. And at the other end was a proscenium arch with a scene going on, simultaneously all the time. And then through this, as you wandered around, were other bits of scenes going on, carts pulled through, and suddenly 4 great huge wagons with silver horses and men on them would come charging through the crowd, through the audience, scattering them to, and you wandered around this kind of, wandered around taking out of it what you could, putting together the story as you could, figuring out what was going on as you could. There was no direction, no direction for you to go into. And they did something which was also one of the most powerful sort of theater metaphors. At the end, when everybody goes mad, they brought in these they were just 1x3s with chicken wire on them, and they made this sort of labyrinth. And you walked through the labyrinth, and in these things were sort of like pens, were all the actors saying all the lines of the play, just over and over, like a sort of mad scene. And then they gradually, without anybody knowing it, disappeared, the actors. And so you suddenly realized that what you were seeing through these bars and these things was the audience, was the other audience, were no actors. There was no curtain call, they just disappeared. And the audience were the madmen left in the theater, and nobody knew whether to applaud or to leave or what was going on. Again, it was an extraordinary sort of evocation and a metaphor for the theater. And I think in that sense, it's sort of just interesting to think of where the theater controls you, where you control it, where it is coercive, where it is freeing. And I think it's just an amusing, interesting fact that what we call masking, which is in itself an interesting word, masking, which is what prevents the audience from seeing backstage, as it were, are called teasers and tormentors. So that, again, there is this kind of sense of almost a violent reining in of the freedom of the eye and of the mind by certain aspects of the theater. I just wanted to just show you or I will try. The great, at least to me, but I think maybe to other scene designers too, the great architectural hero of the past is Bernini, who was not only a great architect, but a playwright and a stage designer and a diplomat. And I just show you these two examples. One's the Pazzi Chapel in Florence, and one is the nave of St. Peter's. The Baroque, which is also interesting in that the word Baroque was also a term of contempt, and still is to a certain extent, along with the word operatic, which is, he's behaving operatically, or he's just got a Baroque mind, are not usually complementary, which is also interesting. Why is that true? It's an interesting phenomenon. But anyway, Bernini seems to be able to raise the idea of theater, and theater, that architecture as theater, and architecture as spiritual theater, to a very interesting pitch. And somebody said that in the Pazzi Chapel, you look at that and your mind moves. You see the rational structure of the architecture. It is delineated. Its form is delineated. You can read it, and you can stand in one place and read the form. In St. Peter's, it is like a theater piece that draws you in. You need to walk down towards that. You are drawn towards that golden light in the thing, which is a scenic trick, which is a bit of stage magic, past this enormous piece of scenery, and that it connects with another interesting word of contempt or quasi-contempt, which is virtuosity. People say, oh, he is a mere virtuoso, which again, all of these things have the idea of emptiness, of extravagance, which masks emptiness or falseness. And but I think that Bernini's kind of exuberance and complete commitment to a kind of and here's another, not by Bernini, but another piece of Rococo or Baroque, spiritual, theatrical, operatic rhetoric, where the lines are blurred, flowing, extravagant, mysterious, unreadable in some ways. Sorry. And there, Bernini's use of in the staircase at St. Peter's, where he had this odd little leftover piece of space. He used a great theatrical trick of incredible force perspective to create the space, or again a kind of virtuosity of carving and gesture. And then maybe, I'm sorry, that last one is out of focus, but that's the way my slides sometimes are. This piece, which is the St. Teresa Chapel, where you have a theater scene, a proscenium, and on either side are these two boxes, opera boxes, in which these elegant people are watching this supremely sensual, operatic, virtuoso bit of religious ecstasy. And there's another Bernini statue, tomb, which again has that sense of a proscenium. But you see there the light and what is coming down over the tomb is a little bit like what we saw at Hadrian's villa last night. This kind of hidden, because this is a source that is hidden, as a piece of theatrical lighting, so that it is possible to think that the theater can be raised into a kind of exaltation and a kind of operatic grandeur. I'd like to just talk a little bit now about text, because I was wondering, one thing that designers, or stage designers do that seems different from architects or other artists is that they have a text. One is designing Hamlet or the Rose Tattoo. But I wonder if that is any different, or in what way is it different than an architect designing a hospital or a home. In what ways do those words, those genres, those programs have a text? But like the theater text, where is that? Where is Hamlet? Is it in the printed play, the modern spelling, modern scene-divided play? There is no original manuscript. There is, you just think, where are these things? Even something like Tristan and Isolde, which has a score, which has Wagner's stage directions, but again, it's all noted, the tempos are noted, it should be very precise, but why does one reputable conductor take 15 minutes longer to conduct it than another reputable conductor? And even a piece like Streetcar Named Desire, a more contemporary, closer to us, what has happened to Streetcar Named Desire because of Marlon Brando? These things, or what has happened to Tristan and Isolde because of Hitler? It seems quite reasonable to say, well, you just do it the way the composer or the playwright wrote it. But where are these things that you should do them that way? And I think it is obviously a much more complicated thing. It's interesting to think, even, so I was thinking last night, looking at those slides of Hadrian's Villa, where is Hadrian's Villa? Is it in the ruins? Is it in what it used to be? Is it in some place in our mind between those two things? Or you think, where is the Parthenon? The Parthenon used to be red and gold and blue and complete. Now it's white and ruined. And where is it? Is that it? And I just thought today, what if you kept chipping away at the Parthenon? You took a little chip out each day. When would it eventually not be the Parthenon? And again, this was a question of aging, of ruins, and we were talking about this in terms of buildings, of architecture. When is a building a building? When is it what it is? And when does the aging destroy it? When should it be restored? When is what it's doing organic growth as opposed to decay? And then I was thinking, in a building in which, or a situation as in a Frank Lloyd Wright house, in which he is the complete arbitrator of the event. Again, when does that? When people change it, want to change it, what's happening? Is that like a director cutting a speech in Shakespeare? Can you do that? Can you not do that? Where is the author? And in architecture, it seems to me it's a very interesting problem because it intersects in so many interesting ways. I mean, there are these attempts, at least in plays and theater, to hold the line. For instance, the Brecht estate will not let you, if they find out, cut a single line of a Brecht play. Or the Rodgers and Hammerstein office comes after you if you attempt to do anything different. And there was a very interesting case, which unfortunately did not get to trial, which was the Lerner, Alan J. Lerner estate, who were suing this production of My Fair Lady because they had changed the intent of the last moment. They hadn't changed the line, but they had Higgins turn away from Eliza. So and Alan J. Lerner's estate said this was not the intent, and they had copyrighted the intent, and they couldn't change it. And unfortunately, they settled out of court because it would have been extremely interesting to have that argument made. I was thinking, I mean, and where do pieces stop? I mean, does the Vietnam Monument include, is part of the Vietnam Monument now the offerings that are laid at it? Is a picture in a museum, is the frame part of the picture? And then, even more complicatedly, is the title part of the picture? These varying kind of ideas of ownership and of text and of the complications of that, I think are very interesting. And I think that architecture is can play a valuable and interesting part in because it falls in a very odd place. I mean, I was asking some of the architecture students, did they feel that architecture was closer to stage design or closer to sculpture? Which is an interesting question as to, because it seems to fall in a very odd place as far as, I mean, to stage designers, architects seem very grand and wonderful, but still, do they have the kind of control that Jasper Johns has over his canvas? I don't know. How does that work? And I also bring up an interesting question as to why do buildings, for the most part, not have titles? I mean, they have titles like 200 Fifth Avenue and Sturgis House and Hadrian's Villa, but they don't have, I mean, why don't they have titles like Nocturne or Arrangement in Gray and Yellow or Broadway Boogie Woogie or Measure for Measure or The Empire of Light or Only Angels Have Wings? I mean, those all sound like perfectly good titles for buildings, but you would never, basically, you never do that. And you think titles, I think, are very interesting. So again, is where are they? I mean, there's this strange Jackson Pollock painting. Most of his paintings are called things like Composition Number 3. And then there's one that's called Full Fathom 5. You think, what was he doing? Why did he do that? And where is that title in the painting? I mean, and what did he think people were going to get from that? So maybe in a certain way it's good that the buildings don't have titles. And you think about, what does a title do to something? And it's interesting that although in music you do all the time Etude Number 3 or Symphony Number 4, you never do that with a novel. You don't say Dickens Number 32 or Play 24 by Eugene O'Neill. Why not? I mean, what is it something to do with the specificity of the event? But then architecture is very specific. I mean, one understands why a symphony is called a symphony. But So there's these questions of names, of titles, of text. Well, I'm just going to could yatter on forever about this, but I guess I will just, I guess it will be interesting for you to see some of my work, but I don't quite know why. But maybe there are just some themes that are of interest. This is a production of Count Ori that I did, a Rossini opera that I did at Glimmerglass. And this is what I would call, and this is a device which I use a lot, and other designers too, which is to accept the theater as a museum, both as a metaphor and as a kind of literal metaphor. So there are these picture frames, there are the golden picture frames that echo the golden proscenium, and a kind of an abstraction of space, but then into that come literal quotes, literal pieces of medieval miniatures that were taken, directly from collaged together, juxtaposed, but absolutely, straightforward quotations. And there's there's another example from Ariadne of Naxos in which I just used a painting in a golden frame. It's a Rite of Derby 18th century landscape, cut out of the book, sent to the paint shop, and reproduced. This is a not very clear shot of a play by Sam Shepard, but you can see maybe you can see up in the top, that little niche had a model of Monument Valley. And so again, it was another kind of quotation. As well as paintings and sort of objects of art, I also use a lot of miniatures. Here's just two more examples of a kind of obvious use of theaters within theaters, of the cliches of theaters of gold prosceniums and red curtains, but using, again, different scales, different sizes, different juxtapositions to set up sort of tensions and double meanings. Here was just, I just brought it as an example of a model, of a set design model for Arms and the Man by George Bernard Shaw, where, again, the kind of abstraction of these two spaces, these two rooms, was made with pattern and shape, and a bit of realistic furniture. The back wall of the theater was just painted blue with torn paper to represent the mountains. And these are two views of a set for The Secret Marriage, which is an opera by Cimarosa we did in Jonathan Miller directed at Glimmerglass. This would be what I would call a kind of, I don't know, what I call movie realism, which is, or at least working in that direction, although you can see that little blue window up at the top, which was a completely arbitrary, abstracted idea. There was no architectural sense for that. But the rest of the room had a kind of basic architectural integrity. Or it's a model of rain, and a set for Ardell, which is a play by Ennui. Now, these were done at the Hartford Stage Company, which is a thrust theater. And it's a very interesting fact, I think, that very, very realistic sets like this seem more real in three-quarter spaces than in prosceniums. They should be quite the opposite, because they're thrust out into the audience. You are looking across things to audience members. But I think that the audience sees, when you can see how realistic it is and how unrealistic it is at the same time because of its context, your energy builds up, and because I remember people coming into Rain, and when the audience came in and it was all lit and there were people outside, they said, oh, it's like a movie set. Well, it clearly wasn't a movie set. It was floating around in the middle of this space full of people looking at it. But somehow they perceived it as that. And so that the illusion of absolute reality sometimes works better in an unreal setting. It becomes mysterious, and it becomes not like a movie. These are two shots from Coronation of Pompeia from Glimmerglass. I just show this to you because this was based on an architectural school exercise from Cornell, where these are Renaissance Baroque buildings. And this was a study that they had made of positive and negative form. So you see that you can see some of it is negative, some of it is positive. And we just took those as a source for this idea. Now this series is another kind of production. This was a production of Hamlet that we did at Hartford Stage Company, which was where we changed the setting, where it was now set obviously in a kind of modern world, where the details were real and observed and modern, but the metaphor in which this all took place was a kind of decaying 19th century theater space, and you didn't quite know whether this theater space was being renewed or restored or torn down. So it was a combination, again, of theater metaphors, of lights, and then in this case, the one scene of Hamlet that takes place outdoors, or one of the few that takes place outdoors, which is the grave digger scene, was simply in the middle of this room. And they pulled out a piece of the marble floor and did the scene, and they rolled in that theater light, which was just turned on. So again, the metaphor was able to expand without it being completely literal and completely constricting. And the only scene that was played in period was the play scene. So that the actors, when they did the murder of Gonzalo, were dressed as though they were from the Guthrie. And as a matter of fact, they were wearing clothes that we rented from the Guthrie for a production of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that I had done there with Mark Lamos playing Rosencrantz, and he was directing this Hamlet. And so, the theater mirrors continue. These are just a couple more scenes showing the kind of theatricality of it and the metaphors of it. Now this was a production of Werther, Massenet's Werther, that we did at Glimmerglass also. Now this was a production that was, again, another kind of quote, a very deliberate quote from Magritte. A kind of, Werther is a 19th century French opera set in a German town in the 18th century. So why are we doing it Magritte? Again, it is a kind of metaphor. It is a way of taking an underlying feeling and applying it to it. And the question of deliberately quoting, it's a little bit, in a certain way, it's like Jackson Pollock's calling it Full Fathom 5. To what degree does one expect or desire that the audience knows it's Magritte? Do they know the name of the painting that it's from? Is that part of the thing? Does it make any difference? What kind of things can you expect of an audience? Do you expect of an audience? These are just some. So this row of little pink houses from Magritte was the town, and then that's the last scene, and that's the scene in Charlotte's house. Again, a deliberate quote of those black curtains and a painting of the sea with a door in it, and so on. This is a production of Lucia de Lammermoor, an opera by Donizetti that we did at the Met. Francesca Zabello and I did at the Met, which was, you will be, I think, slightly surprised to hear that this was like a huge scandal. People just thought this was outrageously daring and violating the peace. And I kept thinking, what? I don't understand. It seems to me perfectly sort of romantic and almost straightforward. But again, anything that seemed to in any way violate a kind of compact that the Metropolitan has with its audience, which is that things will be literal, that they will be pretty, and that drove them mad. Madder than Lucia. These are some pictures of a production of an opera called The Voyage of Edgar Allan Poe by Dominic Argento that we did, Frank Galati directed, we did in Chicago. And I just included these because they show, again, use of scale, use of variation of scale, of small against big, of models, and of just the device of projections, that was in a kind of architectural setting, but that was constantly changing, that was as fluid as one could make it in a kind of, because you were freed by the sort of dreamlike atmosphere of Poe. And this is another psychological dream, Turn of the Screw, Benjamin Britten's opera, based on the Henry James short novella. Now there, again, this was, I mean, there is a piece that is set, I don't know, 1880s, whatever, 1890s. It was written in 1950. So we, instead of using, although the clothes suggested a bit of period, we used the ideas of, it was sort of, I mean, an initial, again, a kind of metaphor, which was the first thing that one starts out with, in a way, was that it was like a Cecil Beaton 1950s fashion shoot. And that kind of draped and torn fabric and strange light and a juxtaposition of objects in a kind of decorative way was the metaphor that ran through all of that. And then I will finish quickly. These are things from the two productions of The Ring. On that side, the far side, is the Chicago lyric opera production, and the San Francisco production. And these show, it seems to me, that a piece has no, in a certain way, it has no way of being done, and in both cases, granting all of the incidental problems and mistakes along the way, I think were both, to me, equally valid ways of seeing them, but they are completely different in almost every way. But they do show, at least in this case, the idea that a theater piece, and particularly a piece like The Ring, which is 4 operas and 17 hours of music, needs something to hold it together. And in the San Francisco production, we based it on 19th century artifacts. So again, it is full of quotations and artifacts. These portals on the side, again, this is not something that the audience knew necessarily. I mean, they didn't know it at all, I don't think, was that they are based on the Semper Opera House in Dresden. And Semper, the architect Semper, was the man who helped Wagner escape from prison after his political problems in 1848 and got him away into Switzerland so that he could write The Ring. And again, they were partially ruined. They were partially a theater. They were a picture frame. We were quoting pictures upstage, as you'll see. The Chicago one is like an empty sort of oriental theater space, an acting platform for the presentation of a piece, a kind of room, you'll see. So there are the two versions of the same scene, which is the Under the Rhine scene with the Rhine maidens. In San Francisco, it was a quote from a Caspar David Friedrich painting done as completely as we could. In Chicago, it's a blue neon line and 3 women on bungee cords, who you see are sort of flying up from the singers below. Two versions of the end of the first act of Rheingold, the entrance into Valhalla. Again, in San Francisco, a very pictorial 19th century kind of look. In Chicago, a more oriental, just a great red lacquer staircase that went up into space. And there is 2 versions of a sort of view of Valhalla. One, again, painted smoke, scrim, painted illusion, model upstage. One, a kind of essence. And there are 2 views, again, of the inside of Valhalla. This, which is again a quote from Schinkel, from the palace that he designed that was not built for the King of Greece. And the other side, again, a sort of abstraction. This is Albrecht and the gold pile and the Nibelungens, closer together in idea. And there's the scene of the Annunciation of Death. In San Francisco, there was this model of Valhalla in the distance, and carved rocks, and a kind of shape that was reminiscent, and you'll see later, of the Beauclin Isle of the Dead. And in Chicago, it's just a white path and a line of white neon. And there are 2 views of the Valkyrie Rock. In San Francisco, it was, again, a deliberate and careful quotation of Beauclin's Isle of the Dead. In Chicago, it's a black pyramid with a white neon around it. And there is fire. In San Francisco, it's smoke and steam and red lights, and it moves back. In Chicago, although we've made this a little bit more thrusting, I hope, but it was just a red line that came down. We decided, we have actually, and I think we're actually going to do this, this is a ring with no smoke. And again, there you just see it. There, that is a deliberate and very accurate quotation of the Caspar David Friedrich Wreck of the Hope, which was the final image in San Francisco. And that's another view of the Valkyrie Rock, again with the fire coming through it. And these are just two views from San Francisco, the burning of Valhalla and the scene in second act of Siegfried, which was based again on a Caspar David Friedrich painting. And there are two other views. This is a model of the third act and the actual thing. I think that's it. Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope that was...
Don't touch that ball.
Who are you?
I hunt in these vast mountains. This ball is mine. Why did you shoot it down?
This ball is mine. I hit it first.
It was I who hit it before you. What brings you here alone?
Don't come near this ball.
I lift the ball onto my shoulders. It is mine.
If your hand touches the skin of this animal, you won't escape alive.
You can't frighten me. The earth here knows my step. You shot at the ball and you missed. Don't put your clumsiness onto others. I'm taking my ball. Again. Again. More. Use up all your arrows. You can't touch me. You can do nothing to me. I master you. Look. I lift you in my arms. I block your lungs. I draw out your life.
Shiva!
Shiva. Shiva.
Shiva, you, the most subtle of beings, blue-necked Shiva, with your third eye. I came to these mountains drawn by a longing to see you. I fought without recognizing you. I am confused. Forgive me.
You are forgiven. I'm pleased with you. Ask me a favor, whatever you wish.
What I wish is an absolute weapon that you possess.
Pasupata.
Yes,
It can destroy the world.
I know.
You can launch it with your bow, but also with your eye, your word, your thought. It's a weapon you can't recall. You could never dispose of it, nor give it back.
I need this weapon.
I give it to you.
Pashupata. The mountains quiver when they hear that name. The trees, the wind, the whole earth shakes.
Arjuna will never dare use it.
Karna, you too must acquire Pashupata.
We will have it.
Wah! Chato! Chata! Bamba! For many months, you have lived in these forests, silent and willing. I want to grant you a favor. I don't know the color of your eyes. I don't know your name. I don't know the sound of your voice. But I tell you, you deserve a reward. And I have many well-hidden secrets. What is your wish?
Pashupata.
What?
Give me the secret of Pashupata.
Who are you?
I'm your servant.
Liar! You want a weapon. That means you are a warrior. You belong to that arrogant caste that I detest, the Kshatriya.
Why do you detest the Kshatriya?
There is nothing to explain. I hate them. I felled 21 generations of Kshatriya with my axe. I came down from heaven to destroy them.
I'm not of that caste. I'm a simple man.
That's the truth.
I'm called the driver's son. I swear it.
Here, I'm a man of my word. The formula is written here. Learn it by heart. Quick! Hurry. The formula will fade away. Finished. It's only a scrap of bark. You remember what was on it? When you utter those words, a creature will come down from the sky and will give you the weapon that you wish. Now I will sleep a little. I'm more than 1,000 years old and I'm beginning to grow tired. Where does this blood come from? Is this your doing?
A worm bored a hole in my thigh while you slept. A tiny worm. Forgive me.
Why didn't you yell?
I didn't want to wake you.
You have tricked me. Only a Kshatriya could display such idiotic courage. An intelligent man would have yelled. Why, Kshatriya? You lied to worm out my secret. But listen to me. Whoever you are, at the last minute, listen to me carefully. The secret will slip from your memory. You will forget it entirely. And that will be the moment of your death. Go! Go! Wara!
Where are we going now?
I don't know yet.
Are you really the author of this poem?
Do you doubt it?
At times you hesitate.
I've composed everything, but nothing is written down. And yes, there are moments when my thoughts escape me.
You must know what is being prepared. One of you must know.
I see the coming of another age, where barbaric kings rule over a vicious, broken world, where puny, fearful, hard men live tiny lives. White hair at 16, copulating with animals. Their women perfect whores making love with greedy mouths. The cows dry, sterile. Trees stunted, lifeless. No more flowers, no more purity. Ambition, corruption, commerce. It's the age of Kali. The black time. The countryside, a desert. Crime stalks the cities. Beasts drink blood and sleep in the streets. All the water is sucked up by the sky. Scalded earth. Scorched to dead ash. The fire rises borne by the wind. Fire pierces the earth, cracks open the underground world. Wind and fire calcinate the world. Immense clouds gather. Blue, yellow, and red. They rise like deep-sea monsters, like shattered cities. Forked with lightning, the rains fall. mountains fall and engulf the earth. 12 years of storm. The mountains split the waters. I no longer see the world. Then, the primary God, when all that remains is a grey sea without man, beast, or tree. The Creator drinks the terrible wind and falls asleep.
Welcome to you both. Why this visit?
War is drawing near. Krishna, I come to ask you to be our ally.
I make the same request. In the name of my brothers.
I love you all. I cannot take sides.
It is true. Our family bonds are the same. But I was the first to enter here. I have priority.
Yes, you were the first to enter, but when I opened my eyes, they fell on Arjuna. It's for him to say what he would prefer. On one side, I set the mass of my warriors, fully equipped, ready for war. And on the other side, myself, alone, unarmed, taking no part in the battle. What do you choose?
I choose you.
Me? Alone, unarmed?
Yes.
That means I have the entire mass of your warriors.
They are yours.
Fully equipped, determined to fight.
Determined and faithful.
Even to fight against Arjuna?
Even against him.
You yourself won't fight.
I will not fight.
Jaya.
Bhishma, we must make the last offer of peace.
It's too late. Death is already here, observing us.
The Pandava are preparing for war.
Yes. They will come to inform me of the death of my children. And of my children's children.
Our friends laugh at your fears. They would throw themselves into the fire for us. We have 11 complete armies against 7. Victory is a fruit in my hand. It's the truth. And I will govern the earth. Or else I will die.
Your reign has been rich and calm.
Yes, so the poets say. All around me, I see happiness. Is it true, Drona?
It's true.
Is it true, Bhishma?
It's true.
Nobody is calling for our enemies to return. I was given a kingdom which I stamped with a number. 1. I won't mutilate this kingdom. I won't skin it alive. I will leave it intact just as it was given. I will never share it. I yield nothing.
Krishna is on his way. He comes in embassy sent by Yudhishthira.
Prepare him a palace. Let all the city gaze upon him. Sprinkle water before him.
It's not worth the trouble. I'm here. Ambassadors only receive honors at the end of their mission. These refreshments must be eaten in joy. Dhritarashtra, my words are for you. The Pandava, your 5 nephews, are like your sons. You must give them what is theirs. There's nothing more to say.
Krishna, I am not the master. I can't answer for myself. Speak to my son.
Do you wish to listen?
I am listening.
You're of noble blood. You're learned. Your qualities are real, but you're destroying your life. The man who scorns advice burns his stomach as though with green fruit. His friends groan for a moment. Then disaster catches up with him. The earth loathes and rejects him.
Krishna, do you believe in the possibility of peace?
I think what I say is possible, otherwise I wouldn't say it.
But in your heart, if you listen without lying, don't you hear the growl of war?
Can a war without a winner be a war? Could a man with his eyes open plunge into war, knowing that everyone will die?
You all keep telling me I can't win. Very well. Death by arms is a glorious death. I will never bow down.
As I was leaving, Yudhishthira called me back and said, "Let Dhritarashtra leave us 5 villages, and there'll be no war."
A king does not stake his kingdom. A king does not stoop to ask for 5 villages. I will not give 5 villages. I will not give 1 village. I will not give the point of a needle of earth.
Let one thing be certain. You will have your glorious death. If the earth is clamoring for victims, we will see a splendid massacre. Dhritarashtra, call them back. They want to take hold of me.
Like madmen, like children.
Your son wants to make me his hostage. It's a mistake.
Stop!
My son, your hatreds for yourself, after 13 years of anger, try to be calm.
Duryodhana, you think I'm alone.
You wanted to take hold of Krishna. You don't know who he is.
You think he's defenseless. Look carefully.
When he laughs, 13 tongues of fire spring from his mouth. Brahma sits on his bow. The guardians of the world stand on his arms. From his eyes, his ears, his nose, below fire and smoke, rays of light stream from his skin. Heavenly, universal, terrible form.
Krishna, lighten my eyes for a moment. I beg you, let me see.
Yes. Here are eyes.
I see you.
Out of chaos, a miracle.
My sons, can you see as I do?
Can you see?
Where are you going? Come back, listen to us, look. Darkness covers me again. I can no longer distinguish anything. Krishna, I did what I could.
So did I.